There was a young boy named Tom. When he opened his eyes on Christmas night, he noticed 3 presents beside his pillow. "Yay! Santa-san came!" he cried happily. He glanced at the window and noticed Santa standing there. Tom tore open the first present right away. Inside were some really cool shoes. But Tom wasn't happy with them. Santa stood on the other side of the window, grinning at him. Tom then tore open the second. Inside were some brand name jeans. His face went red with rage. Outside his window, Santa laughed uproariously. Then, Tom tore open the last present. Inside was a fine bicycle. Finally, he burst into tears. Outside his window, Santa rolled around with laughter, finding it the funniest thing in the world. For you see, Tom had no legs. Hey guys, I'm your host Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to another episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Have you picked up your copy of Kowabana Volume 6 yet? It's available to buy on Amazon right now, or you can read it for free with Kindle Unlimited, so make sure you head over and check it out. This week is our final for the year, unless you're one of our patrons, and to celebrate, I've dug up some Christmas stories for you all to enjoy. Christmas in Japan, while sharing similarities with the West, still has some key differences. It's usually spent with a boyfriend or girlfriend, not with family as we tend to do. And of course, it's not a public holiday, so most people still go to school or work. Chicken, particularly KFC, is the most common food people eat for Christmas dinner, and you can always find some nice iced sponge cake being sold everywhere as Christmas cakes. It's just similar enough to recognize it as the Christmas most of us celebrate, but also different enough to be unique, and I really enjoyed it. But, as we're about to find out, it's not without its horrors either. This first story is about one of the most popular Christmas urban legends in Japan. Find out what happens when you mess around with Black Santa Claus. Have you ever heard the urban legend about Black Santa Claus? On the night of Christmas Eve, you put a picture of the present you want and Santa Claus wearing a black outfit inside your Christmas stocking. Then, during the night, the real Black Santa will visit your house and leave behind the present you asked for. But, in exchange for the present, he will snatch you away instead. And that is the terrifying urban legend of Black Santa. Even if you'd heard it somewhere before, you shouldn't try it in jest. I experienced it the year before last, during my 3rd year of university. It was Christmas Eve. 3 of us girls without boyfriends got together for a Christmas party. At the party, Mika started talking about inviting Black Santa and asking him to give her a boyfriend as her present. Ayumi and I, both drunk, agreed with her sentiment, and we all decided to call Black Santa. Mika drew a good-looking guy, like you might see in an anime, then Black Santa, and then put the piece of paper in a stocking. The 3 of us chatted long into the night. By the time we realized it, it was already 3 a.m. We were starting to get tired, but then suddenly, a loud bang nearby woke us all up. It sounded like it came from the roof. Both Mika and Ayumi looked up. The sound didn't stop there. It was followed by a series of footsteps. We were in Mika's apartment, which was on the 2nd floor of a 2-story building. It honestly sounded like someone was walking across the roof. Black Santa. Up until that point, we had completely forgotten about our little attempt to call Black Santa. But then, a thought suddenly crossed my mind. Mika and Ayumi seemed to have the same idea. No way! They both smiled bitterly. The sound continued. Maybe it's a cat, Ayumi said. But then a loud bang resounded, and whatever was on the roof dropped onto the veranda outside. Something was on the other side of the closed curtain. I was so scared that all the hairs on my body stood on end. It's just a cat. It's gotta be, Ayumi said, trying to shake off her fear. Shall we take a look? Mika said. No, you mustn't, Ayumi said, completely seized by fear. I couldn't agree with her sentiment. I'd rather know exactly what it was than let my imagination run wild. I nodded at Mika, and she grabbed the curtain before yanking it open. Nothing was there. The three of us sighed in relief. It really must have been an animal, Ayumi said. Jeez, give me a break, Mika said angrily. But at that very same moment, something started violently rattling the front doorknob. The three of us screamed. Someone was on the other side, trying to force their way into the house. No way! What is it? Ayumi had fallen into a panic. Mika stood up and approached the peephole in the door. Who is it? I asked. Black Santa Claus. You're kidding. I don't know what she was thinking, but at that moment, Mika started putting her shoes on. Hey, wait, what are you doing? I'm going outside to check. I couldn't reach her in time, and she opened the door and stepped out. Then, a few seconds later, she screamed. Mika! I ran outside after her. Gotcha! Mika stood outside with a guy I'd never seen before. They both looked pleased as punch, as though I'd fallen right into their trap. So it was a prank. The guy was a friend from her university circle, Daiki. Come on, that went a little too far. Huh? Are you crying? I was so scared that tears were rolling down my cheeks. I was angry at them, but also relieved. I was just glad that nothing had really happened. Mika, Daiki, and I returned to her apartment. Ayumi, trembling in the living room, was unaware of what was going on. Ayumi, it's okay. It was all just one big joke, I said. But Ayumi continued trembling. I had to get Mika and Daiki to apologize to her properly, but then she slowly pointed over my shoulder. I turned around and saw Mika and Daiki chatting by the front door. Don't you think you went a little too far by climbing on the roof? Huh? I never did anything like that. Huh? At that moment, the door opened. A man in black clothes stood behind them. Black Santa. I couldn't believe my eyes. Mika and Daiki froze. Black Santa grabbed Mika with one arm and then disappeared with her, just like that. Ayumi's screams echoed throughout the room. Daiki and I quickly ran outside, but we couldn't see Black Santa or Mika anywhere. Both of them had suddenly disappeared. Although she had only intended to play a joke, she had really called Black Santa. 2 years have passed since then, and once again the Christmas season has come around. We still haven't found Mika yet, and the tragedy changed our lives forever. I'll get married after the new year. My husband-to-be is Daiki. He still feels responsible for taking part in Mika's joke. We took comfort in each other after her disappearance, and we soon fell for each other. Ayumi suffered a breakdown after what happened and has been seeing a therapist ever since. Apparently, she'd locked herself up in her parents' house, and I haven't been able to get in contact with her. I feel guilty that I'm the only one who's happy after what happened. As a result, I met Daiki, a present with no substitute. After Mika called Black Santa, he really did leave a gift. But when I think about it, it leaves me with a sour taste in my mouth. Christmas Eve, a day with only painful memories for me. There's no reason for me to celebrate it. Daiki and I even discussed not giving each other presents this year, but for some reason, one arrived. It was from Ayumi. I was happy, but of course suspicious about why she would send something now. I undid the ribbon and opened the box. A Christmas stocking was inside. Inside the stocking was a card. "Merry Christmas," it said, and there was a photo of Mika attached. Beside it was a scribbled drawing of Black Santa Claus. It's not uncommon for Japanese kids to write letters to Santa as well, but as the little boy in this next story finds out, sometimes you don't always get the reply you're expecting or wanting. Find out what happens in Letter from Santa. When C-kun was 6, he wrote a letter to Santa. As December rolled around, he secretly wrote what he wanted for Christmas and placed it under his pillow without letting his parents know. The reason he kept it secret was because he felt like Santa wouldn't answer otherwise. But no matter how long he waited, Santa never replied. By the time Christmas Eve night rolled around, C-kun had forgotten that he even wrote the letter. He got into bed to sleep, and as he dove under the covers, he noticed a letter had arrived. It was from Santa. Excited, he quickly read it. "Your present this year is something red." That was all that was written in it. But he was so happy that he got a reply that he quickly went to sleep, excited for what the morning would bring. Something woke him up during the middle of the night. It was his mother, panicked and shaking his shoulders. His mother forced him to stand, and he drowsily followed her. They ran out of the house, not even stopping to put shoes on. When he turned around, the house was dyed red. It was wrapped in bright red flames, and despite the darkness of the night, the surroundings were lit bright red as well. Various fire engines and onlookers gathered to see what was going on. The cause of the fire was unknown. The police investigated, but were unable to find anything. C-kun stared at the remains of their burnt-down house in his mother's arms as an officer approached them. His room was the only one that hadn't burnt down, and the officer handed him a letter. It was the letter from Santa. Everything else had burnt in the fire. Only the letter remained. "Your present this year will be something red." Realizing that it meant the fire, C-kun was unsure of how to feel. It was too cruel. But then he noticed another line had been added to the letter, something that hadn't been there when he read it before bed. Next year, I'll give you an even more amazing present. Si-kun's 7th Christmas is just around the corner. Not all families celebrate Christmas, but that doesn't stop some children from being jealous when they see their classmates bringing in their Christmas presents from home. The little girl in this next story is about to get something she never expected from a man who looks suspiciously like Santa. But is he really? And what terrible secret lurks inside the box? Find out in Vase. When Arakawa-san was a child, she believed in Santa Claus, just like everyone else. But as she started elementary school, she began to grow suspicious. "My parents were real strict, you know," she said. Both her parents were stoic employees for the local government office. If she asked for toys, she'd get an encyclopedia. If she asked for games, she got a calculator. It was always like that. As she got older, she started to suspect that Santa wasn't real, but she still didn't want to believe it. But when she woke up on Christmas morning and found an animal encyclopedia by her bedside, she went to school dejected. The other kids all got games or big cute toys, all stuff like that. I was miserable, she said. I didn't want them to ask me what I got from Santa, so I had to spend the day out of sight. In order to avoid her classmates on the way home, she took a different route to usual. After passing through the residential area, and then an empty park, Arakawa-san heard a voice call out to her. When she turned around, she saw an old, slightly dirty man. He didn't look like a homeless person, but more like a janitor who had worked too hard. "Young lady, is there something you want?" he asked. "Yes," she replied immediately. "Of course there is," the old man nodded. Arakawa-san had never seen an adult not wearing a suit. Maybe he's Santa, the young girl wondered. He didn't have a beard, like the Santa she'd read about in books, but his eyes were clear like lakes. He patted Arakawa-san's head with his big hand. "Young lady, I'll give you this. I think you'll like it." The old man handed her a box covered in Christmas wrapping paper, about the size of a basketball. "Thank you," she replied. She could tell by touch that it was made of wood. "Merry Christmas!" She smiled at the old man and then waved goodbye. "I wonder what it is." She skipped all the way home. Maybe a doll or a game. As soon as she got home, she opened the box, and inside, she found a vase that fit perfectly. "What's this?" She opened it and then, closing her eyes, put her hand inside. It felt rough. She took her hand out and opened her eyes. Her arm and sleeve were covered in something that looked like white sand. Maybe there's something at the bottom. This time she dug her hand in, all the way up to the elbow. But all she could feel was the sand. She dug around and around. White sand went flying everywhere. "I'm home," Her mother, who had half the day off, called out as she arrived home. Arakawa-san ran to show her mother the vase. At first, she thought it was something she had made at school and laughed. "What's this?" But when Arakawa-san explained, her smile faded. "Where did you get this?" she screamed. Arakawa-san had never heard her mother get angry like that before. She was always strict, but the kind expression she always had on her face was gone. Her mother grabbed her by the sleeve and yanked her arm. Frightened by her mother's sudden behavior, the young girl could say nothing. "These are ashes. This is a funerary urn. This is what remains when you burn a person." Arakawa-san stared at her mother absent-mindedly. The living room was covered in white ashes. And that is why Arakawa-san hates Christmas. Hard to argue, right? "I always have a dream around this time of year," she said. "This monstrous old guy is always clinging to my right arm." My first Christmas in Japan, some of the other teachers decided to go for a drive out into the mountains to get a Christmas tree. It made far more mess than it was worth, and we almost lost one of the teachers in the dark, but we got a tree that was big and worthy of the name, even if we couldn't tell anyone where it came from. Most households tend to decorate with a small fake tree, however, or don't even bother at all. The family in this next story picks up a big tree for real cheap, but it turns out there's a reason for that. Find out why in Christmas Tree. In December, our father suddenly came home with a Christmas tree. He said he picked it up for a few hundred yen at a junk store near his workplace in Akihabara. Despite its cheap price, it was 150 centimeters tall, and with some fiber optic lights, it lit up all sorts of colors. It was flawless and working fine. Putting aside why they would sell such a good tree for such a small price, our family had no history of decorating trees for Christmas. So, it was our first time bringing in the holiday in such a dazzling manner. I was in the 5th grade of elementary at the time, and my sister 2 years older, but we never got sick of looking at the lights. I think even our mother was taken in by it, because on Christmas Eve, she cooked a whole chicken and made homemade cookies for a fine dinner. "I think you'll find some presents beneath that tree tomorrow morning," my father said to us before bed. My sister and I could barely sleep, wondering what type of presents we might find there. When I woke up the next morning, I raced my sister to the tree. The tree lights were still on, and there were 2 gift boxes beneath it. We tore the wrapping off and opened the boxes. Inside was a doll. I got a male doll. My sister got a female doll. It was a doll I'd never seen before. Maybe it was made overseas, but it looked somewhat real, kind of like a Rika-chan doll. I was a little upset that it wasn't the unicycle I asked Santa for. Judging by my sister's face, she was disappointed as well. Then I noticed something small and wrapped in the corner of the box. Like a Matryoshka doll, there was a present within a present. Excited, I opened it, but then I was even more puzzled. There was a miniature unicycle inside. To get not a real one, but a miniature one, was too cruel. I was going to complain to Mum and Dad, but then my sister said something. "Hey, where are Mum and Dad?" Then I realised. Mum always had breakfast ready for us whenever we got up, but I couldn't see her in the kitchen. Our father, who would always be reading a newspaper in the living room, wasn't there either. The two of us looked at each other, confused. Then my sister suddenly looked at something inside her box. There was another small present inside hers as well. She seemed to realize I was looking at her, and she unwrapped it. Inside was a miniature clarinet. She'd wanted one for a while, but this one was a miniature. Suddenly, she dropped the box in surprise. "What's wrong?" I asked. She pointed at the Christmas tree. "The tree. It's not plugged in, but the lights are on." So it was. What was going on? Suddenly, we heard a groan coming from inside the box my sister had just dropped. Ever get a present for Christmas that said it was from Santa? Until a certain age, most of us believe that to be true. But as we get older, we realize that it was actually our parents putting the present under the tree. Or, if you're in Japan, by your bedside. But what if it wasn't actually from your parents? Find out who's leaving presents lying around in Strange Christmas Present. This is a story from one of my childhood Christmases. Our family was pretty poor, and we lived in an ancient, run-down apartment. We never got anything we wanted, but Christmas was the exception to that. Every year, on December 25th, there was always a gift box with a present inside. Inside, I'd find stationery or cheap toys, but Santa had prepared it especially for me, so I was always happy. I still believed in Santa at the time, so I never thanked my parents. But I did take care of everything and put it away in my desk like a secret, treasured gift. My father was a drunk who always lectured me about things, and my mother hated him and was only concerned with her own troubles. So I never once thought that the gifts might have come from them. Around the 3rd or 4th grade, I realized that Santa wasn't real. I was deeply moved when I discovered that my parents were putting away money to buy me something each year, and this time, I swore to myself that I would thank them. On the night of Christmas Eve, I could barely sleep. I kept thinking about what present I might get, and how I would thank my parents. At some point, I must have fallen asleep, however, because a noise woke me up. Something was rustling near my pillow. They were leaving my present for me, I thought in my sleepiness, and I grew so curious that I had to look. I opened my eyes just a little and took a peek. I almost screamed, but I managed to swallow it. A dark figure stood by my bed, but it wasn't my mother or father. It didn't even look human. It had a vaguely human shape, and where its face should have been, 2 eyeballs looked down at me. It had no nose or mouth or hair. Its eyes somewhat resembled my father's, but it very clearly wasn't him. I don't know whether it was fear or sleepiness, but I fell back asleep again. When I next woke up, it was morning. The present was still by my bedside. What on earth was that thing the night before? I had no answers. Inside the box was one of the newest, most popular game consoles at the time. Only a few kids in my class even had it. I don't know why, but I cried. I ran into the kitchen and asked my mother about it. She said my dad had gone out drinking the night before, but hadn't returned yet. So then, it really wasn't him. I decided to stay quiet about the present. They watched me strangely as I played it, so they really seemed to have no idea where it came from. These strange presents continued until I was in the 6th grade. It wasn't until I got married and had kids of my own that I realized the Santa I'd seen was probably my father's ikidio, or living spirit. By that point, my father was in the hospital with liver cancer, so I went to visit him and apologized. I think he really wanted to be a good father, but he just wasn't able to do it. And so, those feelings emerged as an ikidio every Christmas Eve. As for me, my only son is turning 4 soon. My wife and I talked about what to give him for Christmas, and I was firmly against leaving a present by his bedside, although I wasn't able to explain why very well. I nervously waited for him on Christmas morning, and then heard the sound of his footsteps coming down the hall. Seemed he was awake. "Papa, thank you!" He came running towards me holding a box. I dropped the present I was holding at my feet. Seemed the strange presents weren't finished yet. This next story delves right into the weird, and I think it's best experienced blind, so let's head right on in. This one's called Disappearing Christmas Tree. This happened when I was in grade 3 or 4 of elementary school. There was this abandoned giant Christmas tree in a certain town that was bothering the local residents. My family managed an apartment building, and we lived on the 4th floor. This tree was so big that even though it was in another city, we could see it from our veranda. It was so large that it was causing people problems on the road because they couldn't see very well, and it even caused several accidents. The people begged the city to do something about it. One day, there was a huge downpour of rain, and as it cleared that evening, the sky turned pink. I was fascinated by it, so I left the curtains open to see it. It was a Wednesday, and I was watching Dragon Ball Z on TV. Suddenly, the TV fizzled out. Hey, what's going on? It was just getting to the good part. I complained and smacked the side of the TV. Then, I glanced outside and noticed something odd. Aside from the pink sky, the scenery looked different to usual. It looked unnatural. We lived in a basin, so when you looked around, all you could see were mountains. I turned to look at them. A giant person was walking outside. For a moment, I doubted my eyes, but no matter how I looked at it, there was a giant walking past. I looked at its hands, and it was carrying that bothersome giant Christmas tree away. It felt like I watched it go for 30 minutes, but when the TV came back on, only a second had passed. A few days later, we went to visit that town, and the tree was gone. When I asked about it, the locals said there had never been a tree to begin with. What? When I told my friends about it, they made fun of me. But I'm telling you, I saw it for real. I think it had to be the yokai, Daidalabochi. It's known to pose as a mountain range when asleep. At any rate, it's still a mystery to me, even now. I really wish I'd taken a photo of it. Christmas is not always a happy event for some. Some experiences can taint the day, such as the death of a loved one. When a young boy loses his sister on Christmas Day, he decides never to celebrate it again. But is that really what his sister would have wanted for him? Find out what happens in Reunion with My Younger Sister. When I was a child, I had a sister who was 3 years younger than me. She always followed me around everywhere, and as such, when I was hanging out with my friends, she was always there too, and they fawned over her. But when I was 10, she was suddenly hospitalized. My parents wouldn't tell me why, but my mother went to visit her every day, and my father went to the hospital on every free day he had too. Of course, at first I went to the hospital with them, but I was still a kid, so I wanted to play with my friends more. Slowly, my visits to the hospital decreased. After my sister was hospitalized, our entire lives changed. We didn't celebrate either Christmas or New Year's, nor did we go on vacation during the summer. Honestly, I found it all rather boring. My sister spent 3 years battling illness, and then on Christmas Day, my mother insisted that I go see her. I hadn't seen her for a while, and she'd lost a lot of weight. I could tell at a glance that she wasn't doing well. My mother brought out the Christmas cake my father had bought, and for the first time in 3 years, we shared Christmas as a family. It truly was a meager Christmas party, but my sister was so weak that she couldn't even eat her favorite Christmas cake. As the new year arrived, my sister passed away. The last words she said to us were, "I'm sorry for taking up all your time. I love you." I cried and screamed, "Then don't die!" I immediately regretted it, but it was too late. After that, Christmas was nothing but a painful memory, so I never wanted to celebrate it again. Time passed, and I entered university. All of my friends were spending Christmas with their partners, but considering what had happened with my sister, I wanted nothing to do with it, and spent the day at my part-time job. After I graduated, I got a job close to home because I was worried about my parents. I was able to reach work easily from their house, so I moved in and started living with them again. 3 years passed, and my friends and other people the same age were getting married. It wasn't until my 5th year of work that I finally met my now wife. She was the same age as me, and we met through a mutual friend who was worried about me. We were interested in the same things, so we exchanged numbers and then went our separate ways. After going on 3 dates, we agreed to start seriously seeing each other. But having a partner meant that now I'd have to celebrate Christmas. I couldn't get the thought out of my head, but my girlfriend was looking forward to it. On December 23rd, a colleague from work screwed up, and we had to go in to fix it. I sent my girlfriend a message, letting her know that I'd probably have to cancel our Christmas Eve plans for the following day so I could deal with it. But we somehow managed to get it done in time. I dragged my feet to the station to get the last train home, and while I was waiting for it, I saw my dead sister. She smiled brightly at me. Tomorrow's Christmas, isn't it? Merry Christmas, big brother. Your girlfriend is a nice person. You make sure to marry her, okay? Say hi to Mum and Dad for me too. Then she disappeared. I stood on the platform alone, crying. Merry Christmas, I said. The next day, I proposed to my girlfriend. If my sister hadn't visited me that day, I don't think I would be as happy as I am now. But I haven't seen her again since. I've saved my favourite for last this week. In a certain town in the countryside, there's been a string of disappearances on Christmas Day. Each year, a single child goes missing. Nobody has been able to find out who is taking the children, where, or why. But this year, a young boy finds himself alone because his parents are at work. He gets invited to a classmate's party, but it quickly becomes apparent that not all is right. Will he be the one taken this year? Or... Find out what happens in Christmas Weirdo. Strange events continued to occur in the town I lived in. Every Christmas, a child would disappear. One child, every single year. None of them have been found yet. At some point, the kidnapper started to be called the Christmas Weirdo, and people grew to fear him. People whispered that he killed the children, or even sold them overseas. No doubt he would appear this year as well. The adults got together to throw several parties and events for Christmas, making sure the children were never alone. This year, they wouldn't let any of them disappear. I planned to spend my Christmas alone, as usual. Both my parents were away on work. They probably didn't even have a present for me. It was like this every year, so I was used to it. But this year proved different. I was invited to my classmate C's house for a Christmas party. His father managed several companies and was also a member of the prefectural government. Every year, C invited dozens of his classmates to their massive mansion to have a Christmas party. Only, I'd never once been invited. There was no reason for C to invite me, someone with few friends in the class from a poor family. Even I knew that. So, why did he invite me? I was confused, but also excited that I'd been invited. Spending Christmas with others was better than spending it by myself, even if I was ignored. On the night of Christmas Eve, I made my way towards C's house. The house was covered in lights, like an amusement park. Beneath a tree covered in numerous strings of lights, there was a statue of Santa, and it shone red with LED lights. It was like a dream. I was entranced by it all when C came over. "Come inside," he said. He was the one who invited me, and yet his tone was cold. I was taken into the living room, which was as huge as a party hall. There was a couch large enough for 10 people to sit on, and a fireplace as well. It was the type of stately mansion I'd only seen in foreign films. Several of my classmates were already there. After taking a quick glance at me, they all went back to their conversations. At the same time, C had disappeared as well. I had nowhere else to be, so I stood in the corner by myself. More and more of my classmates arrived, but none of them stopped to talk to me. Even when I got brave and tried to talk to them myself, nobody would talk back. They brought out food and drinks, and the more everyone else got worked up, the more depressed I felt. I didn't want to be there any longer, so I went to the bathroom. As I walked down the hall, I heard voices coming from a half-open door. One of them was C, and the other sounded like his mother. Why did I have to invite him? They were talking about me. I stopped when I heard my own name, and my heart pounded wildly. Sounded like C didn't want me to come, but his mother had made him. It's so everyone can have fun together, safely. Every year someone goes missing, and he has no friends, so he's no doubt lonely. So, if he's here instead, and the strange person does happen to show up, then everyone else should be okay. You mean the weirdo will go after him? That's right. You're saying he's a sacrifice? Hey, don't put it like that. He's an important guest. Then his mother laughed. I had no idea how I was supposed to react. That answered all my questions. I thought it was strange right from the start that they invited me. But now, I just wanted to cry. I wanted to run around and break all their Christmas decorations as well. I prayed to the Christmas weirdo. This year, take C instead. But I knew my wishes would go unheard. It was like C's mother said. The weirdo only took isolated children. I decided to go home without telling anyone. But at that moment, suddenly, C's mother screamed. I rushed towards the room. When I got there, a terrifying scene greeted my eyes. C's mother was passed out on the floor. The floor was covered in blood, and she wasn't moving. Then, Santa Claus stood before me. The real Santa Claus. He held a large white sack over his back, and something inside struggled violently. "Let me out! Help me!" It was C. He had really appeared. The Christmas weirdo. I stood there, at a loss for words. The weirdo turned around. We exchanged glances. He smiled, and then took off out the window. The police asked me over and over what the weirdo looked like, and other details of the incident. I was the only person who'd seen it. I was the only person who'd ever seen the Christmas weirdo to begin with. The police drew a sketch of what he looked like based on my story, but they were unable to find out who he was. Because I lied. I didn't tell them what he really looked like. The people around town grew scared that the weirdo had finally shown himself, but that raised even more questions. Why this year did he take a child from a wealthy family in an area full of people? I knew the real answer. The weirdo was angry, just like me, at how C's mother had invited a lonely child like me to her Christmas party to be a sacrifice for him. The weirdo had children himself, after all. When I woke up on Christmas Day, there was a present by my bedside. It was the first time I'd ever received one. When I opened it, a watch was inside. I'd seen it somewhere before. It was C's favorite watch. I put it on, said, "Thank you," and made my way towards my parents in the dining room. don't forget to check out the Kowabana YouTube channel at youtube.com/Kowabana Japan for even more Christmas and winter-themed horror. And if you'd like to join our legion of patrons and get access to over 70 bonus episodes to keep things chilly over the Christmas and New Year break, head over to patreon.com/Tara A. Devlin. Merry Christmas, everyone. I hope you all enjoy the end of the year and spend some memorable time with family and friends. Kowabana will be back as usual in 2 weeks' time, with some all-new terrifying stories to keep you on your toes. But until then, thanks for listening, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.